Hello, biology students! Last time we talked, we learned about what macromolecules and polymers are and that they're made up of building blocks called monomers. Today we're going to learn about the function of those big molecules, those macromolecules. This is still in topic 3. This is your second page of notes for this unit. Alright, make sure you jot down not only the title and the page number, but also today's date. Let's get started. So we're going to go through each of the major macromolecules. We're going to use Roman numerals to make those headings, and under each of those we're going to have some subheadings. Okay, so our first heading, let's talk about carbohydrates, one of our 4 types of macromolecules. We can see in this picture there's lots of foods that have carbohydrates in them. Let's learn about them in more detail. So first subheading under carbohydrates, carbohydrate functions. The carbohydrate function is to give us short-term energy storage. If we looked back at the previous slide really quick, we could see that this is a lot of our foods that we'd eat before a big game, a big race, and so those are really able to give us quick energy fast. Sometimes we even like to think of carbohydrates as things with some sort of sugars. Sometimes they're healthy sugars, sometimes they're a little less healthy, but sugars. Let's learn about the details and examples then of carbohydrates. So our examples is going to be our second subheading under carbohydrates. Our first category of examples are small simple sugars. These aren't always as healthy, but they are still important for your body. They are all only one building block. We know building blocks are called monomers, single unit. Glucose that we learned about from photosynthesis is an example of a carbohydrate that's one building block. Same thing with fructose, okay? Those are, and we don't need to know the details of this, we just might have heard of this word. This is going to be our major example, glucose, of a simple sugar that we would get as we eat a plant, for instance, okay? We sometimes refer to these simple sugars as monosaccharides. Saccharide is just a fancy way of saying sugar. And what was that prefix mono one more time? It meant one. Okay, so this is one sugar, and glucose is a monosaccharide. So monosaccharide is a synonym for small simple sugar. Great. Let's learn about simple sugars that now have 2 building blocks, or 2 monomers. One that we're really familiar with that we might drink is milk sugar or lactose. Some people can't even digest this because they can't break down the 2 building blocks into a monomer, only one building block, and that means they might be lactose intolerant. Sometimes you might get a malt milkshake that has this fancy milk sugar called maltose in it. Because these have 2 sugars, or 2 monomers, it's a sugar, but we have the prefix, instead of mono, we have disaccharide for 2 sugars. Let's learn about bigger sugars, or bigger carbohydrates, macromolecules. We think about the more common ones of these as starch and fiber. And the fancy way of saying fiber is cellulose because it's on the outside of plant cells, cellulose. Which of these can you digest a little bit easier, starch or fiber? Starch, right? Starch is found in potatoes and pasta. Fiber we might get in our cereal a little bit. We definitely get fiber from certain vegetables. And fiber doesn't digest so great, and it goes right through you. It's really healthy for you, and it pushes a lot through your digestive tract. It's not a lot of calories, so really good for you. We call this a polysaccharide. Should remind us of the word polymer, because it has many units, more than 2, of the sugar saccharide. So this is hard. We'll practice this in class, but let's keep going. Lipids. Okay, lipids are our fats, right? What do they do for us? So make sure you get that big new Roman numeral 2 heading. So under the Roman numeral 2 heading, let's get lipid functions as a heading. And then under that, for bullets, let's put down that unlike the other one, which was short-term energy, this one's long-term energy. It's really hard to get rid of fat, right? If you get a little bit of fat on your body, right, it takes a while to get rid of it and lose weight. That's because fats are long-term energy storage. However, you don't want to be too thin because in reality, it's an adaptation to have some fat on you for protection and insulation. It is also on the outside of our cells, and we'll learn a lot more about that later. Wonderful. Let's learn some examples. When we think about food, our major examples are going to be oils, fats, Crisco, waxes, cholesterol. Cholesterol we don't want too much of that. It can clog our arteries. Out of these fats, the ones that are liquid at room temperature, like oils that aren't from animals, right, like olive oil, those are healthier for us because liquid at room temperature is a sign of more healthy. Proteins. Lots of different things for proteins, okay? So we have movement, like our muscles as a function and an example. So we're going to have those on this one slide all combined. We also have transport, okay? Hemoglobin is in charge of transporting oxygen. That's an example of protein. Some proteins have the job of speeding up chemical reactions. We call those proteins enzymes. Proteins are also in charge of defense in our body. We call those proteins antibodies. This should be yellow, my bad. Another example of a function of a protein is structure. All right, right now touch your hair and your nails and think about your eye color. Those different uniquenesses that make you you, those are made of protein. All right, so protein has so many important jobs in our body. We're actually going to spend a good bit of time talking about protein within the rest of this unit. And we'll learn more about why protein is so important and how it can possibly have so many of these cool jobs. Alrighty, pause if you didn't get to write down each of the yellow big bullet examples and pretend that structure's in yellow. And make sure you get at least one example for each, okay? Because I put these on the same slide this time. Okay, let's keep it going. Last but definitely not least, we have our nucleic acids. Okay, nucleic acids are in all foods. All foods. And that's because all of these foods came from living cells originally, or sometimes they're actually still cells, right? But when we think about that, all cells have DNA inside them, and DNA is nucleic acids. Let's get this really down and write it all in our notes. So a function of nucleic acids is to store genetic information because, like I said, nucleic acids are just DNA, right? And why do I care about DNA so much? I hear about DNA in like every single science class. Oh my goodness. Well, that's because DNA are really important because they make those proteins. And remember just a couple slides ago, proteins had so many different jobs. So without DNA, I don't know how to make my protein the right type of protein. I want to make sure if I'm supposed to have blue eyes, I get blue eyes. If I'm supposed to have curly hair, it becomes curly hair. That's the job of the DNA, to make that information, to give it to make my right proteins. And then, I've been hinting at this all along, what are examples of nucleic acids? Well, they're in all of our food, okay? But the Na in the word DNA actually is nucleic acids. DNA, okay? Nucleic acids. And then DNA has a cousin that we'll learn about later in the year called RNA, but for now we're just going to take that at face value. RNA is also a nucleic acid. That's the Na. Wonderful job. You made it through your notes. Woo! So in class, we're going to start practicing reading food labels. Eventually, we're going to analyze the school lunch using all this good information. Get excited. All right, I'll see you guys in class.